Okay, chapter 9. All right, so here we're going to be talking about rental deals from inquiry to occupation. Okay, so from inquiry, if you can recall, go back to the previous segment. Remember, key factors for you to start closing at the beginning of every single interaction. Okay, it could be a message, it could be a call, it could be an inquiry coming in, it could be a WhatsApp in or out. Okay, but you always want to start by closing. So in fact, keep this in your mind. Okay. The beginning and the end of any and all transactions and sales in this business, the way I've done it, the way it's paid me, okay, is the beginning and the end is ultimately a close. Okay, you want to start off with the close, you want to end off with the close. Okay, in fact, even thereafter, right, you still want to be closing because, and you know, the deal never dies. Okay, the transaction between you and someone, again, because the money that you want never lies at the bank, it lies with someone else. Okay, all the money you want is in someone else's pocket, it's not in the bank. Okay, you don't make money. No, you get money from someone else. You take money from someone else, but you take it by giving them something that they want. Okay, so again, my only point is with this is that at the beginning, from the beginning to the end, you always want to be closing. Okay, think about ABC, always be closing. You always want to be closing transactions. You want to be closing people who come to you, and of course you want to get to a point where you close them at the end and you close them on the next deal that they want, because you would have ultimately been the right person for them to do business with. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, the tenant life cycle. So explaining the application process, right, and document collection standards. Okay, so you always want to be upfront and honest with the people that you do business with. Okay, that's going to serve you in the long run. People will always appreciate it, and ultimately they can feel when you're on, when you're not so much. Even if processes or application processes do not work for each and every single person, but because you're honest, you know, they can always find a way to do business with you still. Okay, but you always want to explain the application process when someone comes and they want to rent a property from you. Okay, it's ultimately, you know, requiring them to either be employed or self-employed. If they're employed, they supply you 6 months bank statements, you know, CIPC documents, financials if it's required, depending on whether the landlord does, although financials are very imperative when it comes to commercial. But in most cases, if someone is a business owner or self-proprietary, you know, 6 months bank statements and their ID may suffice. Okay, but again, it's all landlord by landlord case basis. But the standard is that they supply their 6 months bank statement, the CIPC documents, management accounts, financial documents, etc. if it is an actual operating full-on business. Okay. If there are individual people, of course, that are employed, they need to supply their bank statements, their pay slips, their IDs. If it's showing application, it's that, but for each single person. Okay. Now that's only for rentals. When it comes to sales, of course, it's a bit more intricate. You know, people may be buying cash or bond, or they could be or wanting you to assist them getting their bond. Okay, that is all internal. Of course, just liaise with me, and I'll tell you exactly what that person needs. It all differs whether the person is employed or self-employed. But the biggest point here, you need to always be upfront with giving people the information as how do they actually apply in the apartment or property that you have for rental, or how do they actually move forward with applying for a bond or apply to actually do business with you. But that means, of course, you know, the biggest mean of applying to do business with you again would be an agreement, a lease agreement or a sale agreement, right? That's how they apply in doing business with you. Okay, all right, and then document collection standards. Of course, consider POPI. Okay, now you can go on the PPRA website. Okay, I won't dumb you with minute details, but follow particular procedures very seriously and delicately. Okay, people's information is very sensitive. Do not get into the habit of sharing people's documents on WhatsApp, etc. Keep the standard by using email, and if you do have to share people's information, because people appreciate the efficiency of just forwarding emails and WhatsApps, and they generally have the information just sitting on their WhatsApp anyway, just keep it to yourself, right? If you're going to use it. If you're not, find a way to delete it. But just be very wary about people's information, because again, we are led by the POPI Act, and of course, our reputation and yours stands, in line, or in the firing line, if anything is ever, conducted inappropriately. So keep that in mind. Okay, so the application screening standards. Okay, so tenant background screening, affordability audits, and reference validation. Now, luckily we have Soraya. Okay, she's a wonderful administration. lady at the office, and of course once you get all the relevant information you forward through to her, and she will go back and forth with you to understand if this person can actually afford or not, right? So things like salary drops or sufficient income coming into the account, debit orders, are there actually rental payment coming up, etc., etc. As much as she'll do the rental TPN check, all right, the credit check, she will also still assess the bank statements to make sure everything is valid, or this person can afford, like they say they did. And number two, they also, number two is the onus would be on you to verify any landlord references, any employment contracts. Your onus is on you to verify that information and help yourself by documenting it so that you know it and that you can answer landlord when they ask you, hey, where does this person work? Why are they looking for a place to live? What happened at the last place? And did you get a reference letter check? But you want to make sure that you do your own due diligence, okay, on top of the admin, of course, doing the credit checks and going through the bank statements, so that you are ultimately a backup, and Sarai is also a backup for you before you submit to the landlord, okay? Now, there's also other verification methods that you use on the bank statement. You also want to make sure you can validate the bank statement. Most cases, there'll be a QR code, or there'll be a text or a website you can go to validate statements. So keep those in mind, because people will try to phish you or use phishing tactics, or not phishing really, but use tactics to bypass this particular procedure by sending you fake documentation, right? You need to be very aware of that. Right, so board approval and negotiations, okay? Just not using the term board really. In this case, it would be me, okay? Because anything that you send, that you're going to send to the office, I need to also have some documentation of. So make sure that you always come to me and we can deliberate as to, any concerns that you may have picked up. And you'll notice that I'll always ask you about the person that you viewed with you. I mean, who were they with, etc. What was your feel? Anything that they're out of the ordinary, anything they would have asked. And I only do this so that you can get to the habit of understanding the relics between, the right people, the wrong people, etc., etc. So that you can get to a point where you may not need me or do not need me at all. Enough for you to operate, okay? Because at this point, I know enough now that I do not need someone else, but I kid you not, I still, refer some of the information that I get and just, double check it with the people that, I ultimately, operate under in this business, because we all have someone, who helps us out, who's our mentor. I still have one today, and I always make sure that I get all the information, the right information before I make decisions in this industry, okay? Right, so tactical term negotiations, go back to the sales training, you get your means of negotiation there, and income inspection and meter reading protocol. So I'll leave the meter reading because that's post the entire transaction, it's really related to rental, but the incoming inspections, of course, that is something that you need to understand as a real estate agent, a rental agent, or property practitioner, that you are ultimately also responsible to inspect and record how property is, both in rental and sales, before you hand over the keys, right? Because at the end, whether it's rental or sales, you could get accountable or held accountable for your lack of proficiency within that act, okay? But again, always just refer to me. I'll always give you information on the go to ensure that you're always compliant as well, okay? Handover an occupation that also relates to doing inspection, but okay, so it's the point in time where you hand over the keys, okay? I always recommend you give a gift, okay, to the person who's either renting or buying from you. It's a good token appreciation, of course, to keep the energy flow coming between you and that person, okay? Because again, people do business with you, or people really pay towards or pay forth for an exchange, but you always earn and get more as the agent when you, over and above that exchange of giving them the house, you give them something else, okay? So people rarely pay or give out their money for the same value, but they always give out their money to receive more value, which is why they exchange $1 million to buy a house, because the value of the house is much more than the $1 million they're giving out. But when you come and you give them an additional present on top of that, it means that they in effect would have paid $1 million not only for the house, but for more, right? And that stays with them for your benefit. Okay, so post-occupation operations, okay, handling rental arrears only if we are managing, do you get concerned about this? But really, there is an office who do management for us, so you never really have to be concerned, but keep this information for whenever you do move into management, right? And exiting the lease systematically, handling lease notice periods. This again is still dealt by the office, but just keep in mind, so that again, when you do get into a point where you want to move into management, you know this information. But things like early lease cancellations do ultimately affect you, more especially not on the relationship side, because the landlord will always want to, you know, I guess spiritually hold you accountable for the fact that their tenants is debt, right? But you just need to understand it's a relationship game. You always want to be in the light where you take responsibility for your own good and for your own benefit moving forward. Okay, let's move on to the next slide.